We all have times in our lives where we feel broken.
Always felt like a sanctuary for me.
Divorce is a terrible thing for any child, especially the most famous Hollywood divorce of the Brangelina brand. But we all worry about how their kids are living and how they changed after the 9-year battle. How has even Angelina changed? Let's find out more right now. September 14th, 2016. On that overnight flight from Nice to Los Angeles, the meticulously curated fairy tale of Brangelina didn't just crack, it was incinerated. According to FBI reports and court filings that would later haunt the industry, what started as a dispute became a siege. Under the influence of alcohol, Brad Pitt allegedly turned on his family. The details are visceral and terrifying. A mother grabbed by the head and slammed against a bathroom wall. A father pouring beer over his wife and red wine over his terrified children. But the true horror wasn't the mess. It was the violence directed at the kids. When the children, then aged 8 to 15, rushed to defend their mother, the situation spiraled into chaos. Allegations emerged that one child suffered a chokehold, while another sustained a facial strike. Even after the wheels touched the tarmac in Los Angeles, they were reportedly held on that plane for 20 agonizing minutes. A final, frozen moment of trauma before the doors opened and their lives changed forever. 5 days later, Angelina filed for divorce. It wasn't a strategic move, it was an emergency evacuation. She cited the health of the family, a polite phrase for a desperate reality. That flight triggered investigations by the FBI and Child Services, launching a 9-year legal war that would drain the family of its privacy and its peace. But the deepest wound wasn't legal. It was relational. The eldest son, Maddox, hadn't just watched from the sidelines. He had stepped between the storm and his mother, a moment of bravery that shattered the father-son bond beyond repair and set the stage for the defiant independence we see today. Rewind to March 2002. At the age of 27, Angelina navigated the turmoil of her marriage to Billy Bob Thornton. When she adopted 7-month-old Maddox from an orphanage in Cambodia, the tabloids expected a disaster. Instead, they got a matriarch. Her intention to share the adoption with Thornton turned into a solo mission. Angelina raised him alone in those early years, forging a bond that was less like mother and son and more like survivors in a lifeboat. He was her anchor long before Brad Pitt ever stepped into the frame. When Pitt did arrive, adopting Maddox legally in 2006, it seemed like the fairy tale was complete. But Maddox always held a distinct position in the hierarchy. He was the observer. As he grew, he didn't just play video games in the trailer, he studied the craft. By 2015, he was a production assistant on By the Sea. 2 years later, at just 16, he stepped up as an executive producer on First They Killed My Father. This wasn't nepotism. It was heritage. Angelina trusted him to handle the weight of a film about the Cambodian genocide, his own people's tragedy. He carried that responsibility with a quiet, steely maturity that belied his age. But the plane incident in 2016 changed the calculus. Maddox didn't just witness the altercation, he absorbed the impact. After that night, the rift between father and son deepened to such an extent that no amount of therapy could heal it. In August 2019, Maddox made a move that felt less like a college enrollment and more like a strategic retreat. He chose Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea. He didn't pick a party school in California. He picked a rigorous biochemistry program halfway across the world. The footage of Angelina dropping him off at the airport is heartbreakingly human. A global superstar trying to hold back tears hugging her boy as he walked into a life where he could just be Maddox, not Brangelina's son. But the shadow followed him. Late that year, a paparazzo ambushed him on campus, asking the question everyone was whispering, "Is your relationship with Brad over?" Maddox didn't lash out. He didn't run. He looked the camera in the eye and delivered a line that was devastating in its indifference. "Whatever happens, happens." It was a shrug that felt like a door slamming shut. When asked if Brad would visit him in Seoul, his simple, "I don't know about that," confirmed what the insiders already suspected. The bond was severed. By 2026, Maddox has built a life defined by intellect and privacy, standing firmly as the protector of his mother and siblings. He was the first to arrive, the first to defend her, and in the end, the first to leave the toxicity of Hollywood behind to build a fortress of his own making. Pax the End's story began in the humid, crowded orphanages of Ho Chi Minh City. Born in November 2003, Pax spent his first 3 years without a name the world would recognize. When Angelina arrived in March 2007, she had to navigate a complex legal labyrinth. Vietnamese law prohibited unmarried couples from adopting, so she brought him home as a single mother. Brad Pitt would formally adopt him a year later, but that initial solo journey forged a unique, unspoken alliance between mother and son. Pax was older when he entered the circus of Hollywood. He had memories. He had scars. And from the very beginning, he seemed to view the cameras not as a tool, but as a weapon he needed to dodge. While his siblings grew comfortable on red carpets, Pax sought the edges of the frame. On the set of First They Killed My Father in 2017, he wasn't idling in a trailer. He was sweating in the Cambodian heat with a camera in his hand, serving as the set photographer. It was a telling choice. The photographer sees everything, but is rarely seen himself. It was his way of participating in the family business without surrendering his anonymity. This thirst for privacy sparked one of the most fascinating mysteries of 2023. Whispers circulated in the art world that Pax was secretly operating under the pseudonym MTO, creating abstract, digital mixed media pieces. The rumor was that he refused to use his famous last name because he wanted the work to be judged on merit, not DNA. Though his reps denied it, the story itself revealed a deeper truth. Pax was a young man, desperate to carve out an identity that didn't belong to Brangelina. In July 2024, on Los Angeles Boulevard, Pax was riding his e-bike, a symbol of his freedom, through heavy traffic. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He abruptly collided with a stationary car at a red light. Witnesses described a sickening thud. He suffered a head injury and hip pain, lying on the asphalt of the city that had watched him grow up. For a few hours, the petty squabbles of the divorce evaporated. Angelina rushed to the hospital, faced with the visceral nightmare of every parent. The realization that no amount of fame or money can protect your child from the sheer physics of a crash. Pax survived, stable and recovering, but the accident was a sobering wake-up call. It stripped away the celebrity veneer and left just a vulnerable 20-year-old man. It underscored the fragile path he walks, trying to navigate the high-speed traffic of adulthood while carrying the heavy baggage of his past. The next one is Zahara Marley. Born in the dry heat of Ethiopia in January 2005, she entered Angelina's life during a seismic shift. At just 7 months old, Zahara's adoption not only solidified Angelina's transformation from a Hollywood wild child to a global matriarch. When Brad Pitt legally adopted her in early 2006, giving her his last name, it felt like the final piece of the Brangelina puzzle had clicked into place. For years, Zahara maintained her composure amidst the chaos. She was the one holding her younger siblings' hands, the one with the steady gaze. While the world obsessed over the biological kids, Zahara was quietly building a fortitude that mirrored her mother's. She dabbled in the family business, a voice role in Kung Fu Panda 3, but she quickly realized that pretending to be someone else wasn't her style. She wanted to create. At just 14, she launched the Zahara collection, a jewelry line designed not for vanity, but for impact. Every cent of the proceeds went to shelters for battered women. It was a profound statement from a teenager. She was her mother's daughter, inheriting not the fame, but the mission. But the true declaration of independence arrived in August 2022. Zahara didn't choose a glossy Ivy League school or a film program in LA. She chose Spelman College in Atlanta, a historically black college with a legacy of producing queens and revolutionaries. The footage of Angelina dropping her off is one of the most human moments we've ever seen from the star. The Oscar winner was trying to hold back tears, joking about holding it together, looking just like any other mom, realizing her baby was leaving the nest. However, once the dorm room door closed, Zahara made a move that echoed throughout the gossip column. During her induction into the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the first historically black sorority, an institution of immense prestige, she stood before her sisters to introduce herself. She didn't whisper. She didn't stutter. She announced herself as Zahara Marley Jolie. The pit was gone. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a surgical strike. In front of a crowd of cheering women, she publicly amputated her father's legacy from her identity. It was a moment of breathtaking defiance. She was telling the world that she belonged to herself and to the woman who had carried her out of Ethiopia, not to the man whose name was on the legal papers. What makes this tragedy so complex is Brad Pitt's reaction. Publicly, he didn't rage. In an interview with Vanity Fair, he spoke with the wistful pride of a father watching from the cheap seats. He called her smart, said she would flourish, and admitted, "I'm so proud." It paints a picture of a heartbreaking disconnect, a father cheering for a daughter who is actively erasing him from her narrative. Zahara's journey isn't just about college. It's about a young woman deciding that her heritage, her race, and her mother's love were the only titles she needed. She didn't need the pit to be powerful. She just needed to be Zahara. If the other children were adopted into the chaos, Shiloh Nouvelle was born to be its crown jewel. Arriving in Namibia in May 2006, she was the genetic miracle, the first biological child of the two most beautiful people on the planet. From her first breath, she was the holy grail for the tabloids. But Shiloh spent the next 19 years dismantling the fairy tale the world wanted her to play. From the start, she rejected the script. She didn't want the princess dresses. She wanted the suits. She wanted the Montenegro style. Angelina defended her fiercely, telling Reuters in 2010 that she would never force her child to be something she wasn't. While the world debated her gender identity, Shiloh was quietly building a fortress of individuality. She was the rebel with a cause, observing the breakdown of her parents' marriage with eyes that looked exactly like her father's, but with a spirit that was undeniably her mother's. But the real Shiloh wasn't found on a red carpet. She was found in a dance studio. While her siblings explored film or science, Shiloh found her salvation in the sweat and grind of the Millennium Dance Complex in Los Angeles. She didn't use her last name to get ahead. She put in the work. Viral videos showed a transformation that stunned the public. The shy tomboy had become a fierce rhythmic powerhouse. Brad Pitt, in a rare moment of vulnerability in 2022, watched her dance and admitted it brought a tear to the eye, calling her beautiful. He didn't know it then, but he was watching his daughter dance away from him. The climax of her rebellion didn't happen with a scream. It happened with a signature. In August 2023, she shaved her head, a pink buzz cut that was a visual echo of her mother's own wild youth. But the true severance came in May 2025, on the very day she turned 18, the day she became a legal adult. Shiloh didn't throw a party. She hired a lawyer. Using her own money, she filed a petition to legally remove Pitt from her name. It was a cold, calculated, and devastatingly precise move. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait. She became Shiloh Jolie. For Brad, this was reportedly the deepest cut of all. Shiloh had long been considered the one closest to him, his little dancer. To see her use her first moments of legal adulthood to sever ties with him was a rejection so absolute it left no room for interpretation. She had watched the flight. She had lived through the custody wars, and she had made her choice. She is no longer just a mix of Brad and Angie. She is a woman who looked at the most famous legacy in Hollywood and decided she would rather walk alone than carry a name that weighed her down. If the older siblings were the soldiers in the divorce, the twins were the civilians born directly onto the battlefield. July 12, 2008, Nice, France. The arrival of Knox and Vivienne wasn't just a birth, it was a global summit. The first photos of them sold for $14 million, the most expensive baby pictures in history. They were brought home to Chateau Miraval, the fairy tale estate that was supposed to be their fortress. Today, in a cruel twist of irony, that very estate is the radioactive center of the War of the Rosé, the lawsuit that refuses to die. The twins grew up watching their birthplace turn into a courtroom exhibit. Knox is the enigma of the clan. Physically, he is a genetic echo of a young Brad Pitt. The same jawline, the same effortless stride, but emotionally, he belongs entirely to the Jolie camp. While his brothers Maddox and Pax moved out to build their own worlds, Knox remained. By 2026, at 17, he has quietly stepped into the role of the man of the house. He isn't chasing fame. We see him on coffee runs in Los Feliz, or quietly escorting his mother to events, a tall, protective presence who seems to view the spotlight with deep suspicion. He is the silent observer, the boy who learned early that in this family, privacy is the only true luxury. Then there is Vivienne. She was the baby who wasn't afraid of the horns. In 2014, she appeared in Maleficent, not because she wanted to be an actress, but because she was the only child who didn't scream when she saw her mother in full costume. That fearlessness has evolved into a quiet, blue-collar work ethic. In 2024, she didn't ask for a lead role. She asked for a job. She worked as a volunteer assistant on Angelina's Broadway production of The Outsiders. She wasn't in front of the curtain. She was in the trenches, wrangling props and managing schedules. Angelina called her tough, a compliment she rarely hands out lightly. But the most telling detail wasn't her work ethic, it was the playbill. On the list of credits, she was listed simply as Vivienne Jolie. Just like her sisters, she had taken a scalpel to her father's name. It was a subtle, professional erasure. The twins, once the symbols of the perfect union, have grown into the final proof that the union is dead. They are the quiet closers of the Brangelina era, two teenagers who looked at the most famous legacy in the world and decided they preferred the dignity of work and the safety of their mother's shadow. While her children are boldly pursuing their dreams, Angelina Jolie is grappling with the aftermath of her own triumph. At 50, the 9-year war for custody cost her more than just millions in legal fees. It extracted a tax from her very marrow. In the years following the split, the stress manifested physically. She went public with her struggle with Bell's palsy, a condition where half the face becomes paralyzed, and chronic hypertension. These weren't just medical diagnoses. They were the body's way of keeping score after a decade of high-alert parenting. She won the primary custody. She kept the United Nations of her family together. She shielded them from the most toxic elements of the fallout. But now, she faces the cruelest irony of motherhood. The empty nest syndrome hits differently when your nest was the only world you allowed yourself to inhabit. She sits in that $25 million estate, surrounded by the artifacts of her humanitarian missions and the echoes of a family that is no longer a single unit. Maddox is in Korea. Zahara is in Atlanta. Pax and Shiloh are building their own lives in the city. The silence in the hallways is deafening. In candid moments, she admits to a profound loneliness. She doesn't date. She doesn't socialize in the traditional Hollywood circles. Her entire existence for 20 years was mom. Now she focuses on Atelier Jolie, her sustainable fashion venture, trying to stitch together a new purpose. She is the unyielding matriarch who realized too late that by raising her children to be fiercely, unapologetically independent, she was also preparing them to leave her behind. By 2026, the Jolie kids have established themselves as a symbol of a new breed of Hollywood royalty, one based on privacy, social conscience, and an unwavering refusal to conform to the traditional rules of fame. They present a cohesive front. They have formed a protective ring around their mother and around each other, a bond forged in the fire of their parents' destruction. Angelina's greatest achievement wasn't Maleficent or Girl Interrupted. It was the fact that, despite the private jet altercations, the public mudslinging, and the legal purgatory, her children are remarkably stable, deeply connected to one another, and entirely free of the Pitt shadow. The story of Brangelina didn't end with a happily ever after, but it ended with a truth. It reminds us that even the most beautiful people bleed, and even the most gilded lives can be hollow at the core. As we look at Shiloh's fierce dance moves, Maddox's scientific pursuits, or Pax's art, we see a generation that has learned that a name is just a label, but a soul belongs to no one but yourself. We often worship the stars, but perhaps we should admire the children who survive them. Which of their journeys moves you the most? Is it Shiloh's rebellion, Zahara's dignity, or Maddox's quiet leadership? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to help us.